Cool. And now we're recording. Cool. So we'll talk a little briefly about the ills of fast fashion and the textile industry as a whole, and then the majority of this is about Fibershed, specifically what Rust Belt Fibershed does, but also the potential for fibersheds around the globe and how we can kind of move forward in an asset-based way. So a fibershed, if you're not super familiar with a fibershed, it is essentially a geographical, it's a strategic geography. And the founders of whatever fibershed, or the person who is thinking about their place as a fibershed, determines what that strategic geography is. So for us, our fibershed, the Rust Belt Fibershed, we have established it as 250 miles around Cleveland, Ohio. And within those 250 miles of Cleveland, Ohio, that is where we source all of our local dyes, local labor, and local fiber. So this is kind of where we are on the map. Our specific mission and vision is to think about specifically the economic integrity of a new textile industry, how we can be stewards of our ecology through our textile industry and through the making of a textile industry, and how we can connect people to their place. And so have it be a place-based relationship. And this is really exciting because what we're doing is we are kind of reimagining what an industry can look like in the 21st century. And so in this reimagining, we're hoping that, and I want to read this because I like the wording of it, that makers and consumers alike can participate in ways that honor the social give and take among living beings, bringing about a strong, creative, and embodied place-based textile economy that is fully integrated with nature. So we're not just seeing the ills of what everyone else is doing and thinking about how we can do something different, but we're really founding a new industry and reimagining a new industry on a relationship and seeing ourselves as a part of nature and part of our natural ecology. And that's how we can reimagine this new industry and what that looks like. So Fibershed with a capital F is the movement, is the, I guess, parent organization. You can talk about any fiber shed as big or small as you want. If you live on a farm and you have sheep and you shear that sheep and you spin your yarn and you make a sweater, you are your own fiber shed, right? It's kind of like a watershed or a food shed. You can determine the geography and the span of the geography as large or small as you want. It's all individual and it's all relative. These dots on the screen, hopefully you can see this map. I know it's a little grayed out, but we have I think now we have maybe 70 affiliates, Fibershed affiliates. And that's because they have to be affiliates because it's a regional organization. And so these near 70 Fibershed affiliates can be the touchstone for organizing a value chain and supply chain for your region. But of course, a person who, shears sheep and sells their yarn doesn't necessarily have to be plugged into their fiber shed. It's just that the fiber shed can help support the organization. The specific organization can help support producers and makers and consumers in understanding where their clothing comes from, essentially. So that's kind of the purpose of the Fibershed. It's there as an orchestrating principle and an organizing principle and movement to help people think about where their clothes come from and help make those connections. So we often think about, of course, these are the slides I'm going to kind of flip through really quickly, but just to kind of give us a foundation, you all are very conscientious about what we're wearing and where it comes from. And I see a chat really quickly here. So let me just, oh, cool. Thank you, Allison. Okay, so we are, obviously, I think you all know this, the majority of our clothing comes from synthetic fossil fuel derived materials. And the pollution from that is really devastating to our global waterways and health of human workers and all of that. When we think of natural fibers, when we're looking at our tags and we want to think about, where our clothes come from, natural fibers are always going to be a better buy. If you're buying new clothes, then your synthetic fibers, and you all probably know this. So what we're looking for on tags are plant-based fibers. So that's cotton, flax, hemp, nettle, jute, dogbane, milkweed, yucca, cattail for different grasses. Animal fibers, we're looking at sheep, goat, alpaca, rabbit, horses. Silks can be mulberry, and then leather, fur, and hides in a very responsible way, of course. But when we're thinking about fibers, just full stop, first thing perhaps is thinking about, the natural fibers, because we're going to think of them in a way that can biodegrade. So it's not just about fast fashion and the harm of workers, but it's also about the lasting and the decomposition, I should say, the ability for these fibers to decompose and where we're getting them from and what that extraction method is. And natural fibers are going to be a better bet. How are our clothes made? You all know this. In this linear industrial textile system, much of them is virgin feedstock and much of them is plastic. We produce way more than we'd ever need. And that's because it's so cheap. And it's so cheap that even because of when it comes to natural fibers, even it can be so cheap. So cotton can be so cheap, even though it's not subsidized like oil. But cotton can be so cheap because it's monocropped and farmed in a way that is detrimental to our ecosystems. So it's not just the fossil fuel derived clothing. It can also be natural fibers, even though they're better than extracting fossil fuels. These monocrop operations do get subsidies from governments and are very destructive to ecosystems. And then we also know that synthetic fibers are subsidized by oil and big oil corporations. And so that's why they're so cheap. And of course, you all well know that there's exported labor and all of the ills with that. So when we buy it, of course, then we know the whole microplastic situation and that is detrimental for the synthetic fibers that we're purchasing. So the plastics and nylons, the rayon, the acrylic, all of that, that is destroying our ecosystem, the waste, the water that we're drinking from, all of it. And even when we are able to get the microplastics out of our effluent from our washing machines, and we're able to save it in the wastewater treatment centers. In America, anyways, those wastewater treatment centers sell that sludge back to the farms. So our microplastics actually end up in our farm fields, which is very bizarre. And that's not the soil to soil chain that we're thinking of. That's like the opposite of it. Even though it follows that idea of like soil to soil, this is now just depositing plastics in our soil. So clearly we want to get away from plastics. And then you all probably know too that our skin is the largest organ on our body, and the microplastics that we're wearing are impacting our health. And some of you may be familiar with people who, can only wear organic unbleached cotton or that sort of thing because of the eczema and the reactions, the visible reactions that people have to clothing. But when we are wearing these, they do have, whether we know it or not, they're having detrimental impact on our health. Dyes, same thing. And the reason I'm going over this is because we often don't think about dyes, and that's a large part of our fiber shed. Local fiber, local labor, local dyes. And so the synthetic dyes, of course, are also chemicals. And when our socks, red socks turn something white in the wash, that's because, we are, that chemical dye is leaching out into something else. And so in the same way that it leaches onto our, whites in the wash, or our blue jeans fade in the wash, even if they're 100% organic cotton, they're not dyed with 100% organic dyes. And that is something that always trips us up, right? Because we're like, oh no, this is 100% cotton organic shirt. And yet the dyes that are used in the treatment of that garment are exceedingly toxic and, are endocrine disruptors and all of that. And that's leaching into our water, and that can't be removed from our waterways. And then we know about waste colonialism. I'm sure you've talked about that. So there's a lot of problems. There are a lot of all of these different ideas of, possible solutions. So we have the fast fashion, and what is the solution to fast fashion? And what is the solution to workers' rights? And we have agriculture, and we have soil, water, air, and we have local economies, and we have waste, and we have human health, and all of these different areas. We're always searching for solutions. And sometimes when we just dip into one silo of fast fashion, or we just dip into one silo of workers' rights, you start to create a solution that ends up affecting and rippling in a negative way into these other silos, because we realize that they're not all silos, they're all connected. And so what we really want is a systems-based approach to thinking about how all of these things are connected, and all of these silos that you see in this picture here are really all part of an entangled, interconnected web of potential for a fiber shed to work through and create better human health, and thinking about our waste reduction and our use of waste. There is nothing as waste, we know that, right? Local economy, impacting our soil, water, air in a positive way, regenerative agriculture, paying people their value and having people be healthy and loving their jobs. And then, of course, loving our own unique creative fashion as well. So this is the potential of the fiber shed model. And this is just an image here, just reminding us that we are nature and that it's all connected. And so that's part of what we really work through in fiber shed. So just like a food shed, you think about local farm to table, right? You have the apple, you eat it, it is composted in your backyard. That is a soil to soil system grown from the soil, hopefully organically, nurturing your own body. Core goes back into the compost pile. That core feeds the organic microbiota of that soil. We have the same thing happening with a fiber shed. We like to think of a fiber shed as a soil to soil. And then we also have the arm that is upcycling and, mending and keeping everything that we already have in circulation. So I'll hit that, but I just want to remind everyone of that. But if we're thinking about virgin fiber, this is the making sure that we're monitoring and taking care of and stewarding our land and our soil. And from that healthy soil comes the healthy fiber. And then that is processed in a responsible way and made with care, bought with intention. And then at the very end of a very long life cycle, that thing can be composted and turned back to the soil to feed the microbiota of the soil. Okay, so this is our what we would start with, which is the first part of that soil to soil system, which is our farmers. So we're really kind of digging into here about who is making our fiber. And when we're thinking about it in a regional aspect, we're thinking about the farms in our bioregion who are shepherding the wool, the sheep, right, for the wool, the alpaca fiber. We're looking at people who are growing flax or hemp. And we're really focusing on the assets in our region. So specifically the Rust Belt Fibershed, we have a ton of alpaca. We can grow flax really well here for linen. We do specifically have a shorter growing season than most other areas, which is something that we have to consider when we're thinking about a fiber shed. We have a ton of meat sheep here, not a lot of fiber sheep. So what can we do with that fiber as well? We have a lot of deer, too many deer, like the park systems cull the deer, which means that they actually like go in and shoot the deer, right? And they donate the meat to homeless shelters, which is fantastic. But what's happening with all of the hides? And we have a ton of small farms here, which is really exciting. And that's a really important part of this whole thing. So each fiber shed will look at the assets on this part of the soil to soil chain, and they will help to try to support and connect those assets. And so I'll go into a couple of examples of how this can help our communities, our ecology. So just in this part of the chain with farmers, right? What we like to talk about specifically are ways that carbon can kind of move from the air and get deposited down into the earth via farming. And that's the land stewardship that we're talking about. It's called carbon sequestration. And essentially what it's doing is it's using farming with a lot of different techniques to take the carbon out of the air and plug it back into the ground to make exceptionally fertile soil for amazing things to grow. And so carbon isn't bad necessarily. It's just when it's in the air, it's bad, right? We want to put it back into the ground. And farming has the ability to do that. So climate beneficial fiber is actually carbon negative fiber. And this is part of what Fibershed is working on. And that's, using fiber animals to increase soil organic carbon levels, to increase biodiversity, to improve the water holding capacity of the soil, to restore healthy ecosystems, and to provide climate benefits. And we have an open source data tool to do that, which is really exciting. So any farms in our area, we could say, hey, and Rust Belt Fibershed is working on climate beneficial certification of fiber for our farm specifically. You don't have to be a fiber farm. You could be a flax farm as well. And we don't have any cotton farms this far north. But that's kind of what we're looking at here is how can we, and this is also a selling point too for farmers who are honestly trying to market their goods as well. And a really good story for consumers to understand when they go to purchase. This is very different from greenwashing, right? And so we have to make sure that we're all very aware of the difference between greenwashing and, maybe some companies who pay someone for carbon capture, right? Or they're planting a couple trees because they're a B corporation or something. And the farms and the work that's being done to actually literally from that piece of cloth, how that piece of cloth may actually, in the making of that piece of cloth, help sink soil organic matter back into the soil. When it comes to bast fiber, and bast fiber is your, anything that's a long stalk essentially. So you have your linen, your hemp are the two that kind of comes to mind. Flax is linen, by the way. So when I talk about flax, flax is the plant. Linen is what is made from flax. So 0% of linen is actually grown and manufactured in the US. So those of you that are in other countries, very lucky to have local linen in your area. It's an amazing, amazing crop. It's just really resilient and it brings a lot of, it's a pollinator, like it's just amazing. So, but in America, not just the Rust Belt Fibershed, but we no longer have any linen production at all. There's no such thing as domestic linen, and there's no infrastructure for domestic linen. So that's part of what we as fiber sheds all kind of coming together in America are trying to do is to create kind of bring that industry back because this plant is such a great plant for our ecosystems. And then same thing for hemp. So hemp went away due to a lot of legislation and is now coming back for production for fiber. And the really cool thing about hemp and flax together is that they can be processed pretty much on the same machinery. So as soon as we bring industry for linen back to America, we can bring hemp industries back. And the cool thing about being on this end of the industry where there is no industry is that when we're trying to build an industry, we have the opportunity to do it very responsibly because it's not done yet. And so that's just what I hope is going to happen, is that it will be done very responsibly. Yes, Chico Flax in Northern California is working on increasing production. That's super exciting. I'll show you here. We are all part, and I was on the board of the North American Linen Association. So Chico Flax, along with Shannon and Angela in the Pacific Northwest Fibershed, who started Fiber Revolution, Rust Belt Fibershed, and the PA Fibershed and the PA Flax Project are pretty much the ones kind of leading the way for linen production in North America. And we're all kind of doing that through NALA, which is the North American Linen Association, and we're all doing it in our own ways. But the North American Linen Association was formed so that we could kind of come together and brainstorm how we bring more than just in our respective fiber sheds, bring more resources to the table for how we can do that together. So all of us together are trying to figure out how we can expand regional, manufacturing and all of the research that comes along with that, bringing in industry experts from overseas. And that's kind of what NALA is working to do. So hopefully, along with Chico Flax and Pacific Northwest and the Rust Belt Fibershed and PA Flax Project, if you're in any of those areas, and hemp, if you're in Maine, our fiber sheds, those 5 fiber sheds are really strong in bast fiber research. And so if you're really interested in that sort of thing and you live in one of those areas, definitely plug into your fiber shed. Yes, exactly. The problem with, I see, Sonia, your point here. Yeah, the hemp has it has a gumminess to it. And so the processing of it is actually more complicated than flax in the very beginning. Flax can actually, because it doesn't have to be degummed, it seems to be a little bit easier to work with just right off the gate. Also, there's not the legislation of working with hemp and turning it into fiber that is super bogus, but that's kind of what's happening there. So to kind of get into a little bit away from bast fibers, but just to kind of talk about conventional fabric production and how it can be climate beneficial in a very optimistic way. This was a research done in, I think, 2020 from Fibershed, and I think it's gotten even better since then with cost of infrastructure and I shouldn't say cost of infrastructure because that's gotten more expensive, but streamlining optimal ways of building infrastructure and what that looks like at different scales. But the really cool thing about this is the carbon footprint, and thinking about Fibershed possible is 3.4%. That's, just solar derived energy, conservative compost credit, good land management, and Fibershed optimistic, really what we're all shooting for and trying to reimagine in different working groups is how we can actually get this to a negative 37.3 carbon footprint so that we are actually really truly on a larger scale in our region sequestering carbon into the soil.
Hey, Jess.
Yeah, please.
Before we move on to wool, I know we did have a question about linen in the chat. Lisa asked,
sure. Let me go back.
Did linen lose popularity due to modern lifestyle and not teaching people how to iron their clothes? Or I guess just how did linen lose popularity in the US in general?
That's really interesting. I think it probably was a confluence of a lot of things. Production went overseas because of NAFTA. So NAFTA offshored a lot of our textile production in the 90s. And that, that was detrimental to, I keep saying that word detrimental, but it seems like everything's detrimental. That really changed what local textile production looked like. So that was happening in the 90s. Then because of that and extractive labor practices, clothing became really cheap, and it became cheaper to grow, to extract and create plastic clothing. And linen then became more expensive just by comparison. And so I think it's been a slow roll into linen. I think it's the not knowing how to use an iron, because I get that a lot, but that's just anecdotal. I feel like people are like, well, linen wrinkles so easily. So I hear that a lot. So I feel like that's anecdotal, but true, probably. And since you're saying it, I bet that's probably a thing. But I think a lot of it is just that we didn't produce it here anymore. And then so importing it became far more expensive than importing any other polyester or acrylic clothing. That then became a cultural American thing to have more cheaper clothing for talking about America here than to have more luxurious clothing that is maybe a little bit more expensive. So I think that's kind of why. I think it's probably a lot of different reasons, price being one of them, and just not really more clothes over higher quality clothes as a cultural thing, I think has a lot to do with it. Good question. So what we're also looking at from an industry perspective is co-products and making sure that we have all these assets from a labor perspective, that we don't want to sent to the compost pile, or even worse, the burn pile, which I just was presenting at a farmers meeting this weekend. One of our farmers here said, he's like, he was arguing for his own limitations, truly is what he was doing, but he was saying, it's hard, like it's too hard. I take my wool and I just burn it or I throw it away. I get a dumpster and I throw it away. And I was like, well, can someone just pick it up from you to like, are you interested in a second stream of income? Like, yeah, asking these questions, And he was like, yeah, but then I got to do more work. And I think there's just a culture on not getting the value for farmers. They aren't used to being valued, honestly, and getting a value for their product. And they are overworked already. And so what we as a fiber shed are trying to do is trying to figure out more streams of income for farmers that truly value their work and the hours they put into what they're building. And that includes co-products. So if we're talking to a hemp farmer in Ohio who's selling all of their hemp to a bioplastics company in Detroit in our fiber shed. And that's cool. It's going to replace like 25% of a plastic nurdle. 75% will be plastic, 25% will be hemp, which is better, I guess. But I was trying to convince him, like, let's use some of that hemp for building insulation and just make building insulation from it. So we don't need other insulation. We don't need fiberglass insulation, And so I think there's a lot of opportunity here because this industry has become cheap and has moved overseas, but we have so many people wanting to start small businesses, wanting to be entrepreneurs, and we have a way to get that workforce development going. And so we're really interested in the co-products as well and making sure that everyone gets a fair wage for what they're doing. It is very disheartening, Marissa, that farmers don't feel valued. It's probably it's the same thing from, think about where our food comes from. It's a global thing, right? And it's something we need to shine light on all that everything comes from soil. Yeah, absolutely. So kind of speaking of that workforce development and creating jobs, that's something that in our personal fiber shed, we have a big gap of mills. New York and LA have mills still to create a regional yardage, and our fiber shed doesn't have that. And so we're really, really interested in how do we create workforce development. And so fiber sheds are also working on this in your region. So we have quite a few partners. I just pulled these but we have more partners than this, but these are the ones who are really invested in workforce development, because if we're building an industry, we also need that local labor, right? Local fiber, local dyes, local labor. And so we have people who are really interested in doing stuff differently and cooperatively and collaboratively, and call it like social manufacturing and making the community part of it. And what does that look like? There are so many different ways that can look like. And if you're interested, we actually have, and this is an international working group, and we have someone from, I think, Ireland, 2 people from Ireland, the Fibershed Ireland in this group. It's a new economics working group. And it's, if you're really interested in cooperatives and thinking about the economy a little bit differently and workforce development and what that actually looks like to build an industry in a responsible way and have people feel valued and have people plugged in as part of a community and thinking about capital in a different way. We have a new economics working group that is just started, and we're just reading Jason Hickel's book, Less is More, right now. And so that would be, if you're interested in that, that's open to pretty much anybody. You don't have to be the Fibershed affiliate person, but I would urge you to get connected with your Fibershed first before you hopped in on that working group. So make sure you kind of connect with them. We're thinking about how do we do collaboratives with dyes a little bit more, and how do we, make sense of how do we take what we already have in our closets and make them more interesting. And this is how I got into Fibershed in the first place. I was a natural dyer back in 2010, and that's how I found Rebecca Burgess's book, Harvesting Natural Color, before Fibershed even began as a thing. And so the natural dyes are kind of close to my heart, but they're an easy way to start a co-op and bring people together in community. And so I actually have a company called driftlab.earth. I work with my sister who we try to bring this understanding of like using color as a portal to people, but really thinking about our scape collaboratively. Composting color. So this is the idea of taking our dyes and composting them and making that better. We have our Praxis Fiber workshop, which is a workshop that in our area who does an indigo grown cooperative, and they do natural dyes and in a way that ferments the natural dyes. It's very, very interesting, but we have them as a huge asset here for natural dye production. Also, just as far as dyes go, alpaca itself has 22 natural shades. So sometimes you don't even need natural dyes to create color. And so just kind of thinking about what is in our region already that we have access to, that is so very cool. Let me just check the chat here. Okay, it looks like Allison taking care of it. Cool. And then, thinking about the very last part of this whole soil to soil chain, and after we go through those who are making things and processing things, we're really thinking about us and using it. And you all know this part very well, but the mending and the upcycling and keeping what we have in production is really important for us. And how do we do that before we can send it back to the soil? So I think you all have, what is the no new clothing? What is the competition? No new clothing competition? Is that what it is?
Yeah, we have a no new clothes challenge going. It
No
goes
new
on
clothes.
all year round, but yeah, June 1st to the end of August is like the big time for no new clothes, which I'll
Okay,
drop the
cool.
link in the chat if anybody's interested in checking it out.
Yeah, cool. So that's like just very much, upcycling, mending, understanding what you have in your closet and keeping that in circulation, clothing swaps. All of those things are incredible, incredible things to do. I would say those are actually like the first stop. It's at the end of our soil to soil chain. But those are like the first stop in really responsible wearing and sustainable clothing, right? So that's definitely something that we want to make sure that we're doing first. And just to kind of hit this, so this is the go ahead. So the soil to soil, value chain. The idea is that our clothing is part of the soil, just like our food, just like we are actually, and can be returned to the soil to feed the soil biology at the end of its life. And I mentioned that earlier, but this is an image that we love sharing. It's a Soil Your Undies challenge. And it's about, burying your undies to see how they can be, if they are consumed, and what that looks like, and how they can biodegrade in the soil, how that feeds your biology in the soil. And so here we have some really healthy soil, and hopefully, there's some elastic here, nylon thread, of course, in the underwear, but I love thinking about how that is, it also is a parent of how healthy our soil is how quickly our clothes decompose in it. Programs that we personally have as a Rust Belt Fibershed, and all fiber sheds have different programs, have different things going on. And I do definitely need to say that all Fibershed affiliates, all of them start out as volunteer organizations. So no one's paid for anything. It's because someone really vibes with this work and wants to promote it. And then eventually some may find that they have the capacity to turn it into a 501c3 or a nonprofit. As a Fibershed affiliate, you're obviously not supposed to turn it into a company, a for-profit company. So people turn it into a 501c3 or a nonprofit. And that is, that's really great. And I think there are only maybe 10 of us out of 70 who are 501c3s. So if you are trying to plug into your Fibershed, know that these are volunteers with a project that they're really working on. And if they're not responding to you, just keep hitting them up and asking for them to, respond back that you're really interested in helping them out, that sort of thing. Just like any volunteer program, it can get overwhelming at some times, and people can be demanding and like, you're not doing enough or that sort of thing. I'm just being honest, and that can, if it's not someone's full-time job or they're not being compensated for it, a lot of times we work on compensating our farmers and making sure everyone's getting paid. And then a lot of the programmers are just really burnt out at the end. So just know that if you're contacting anyone. We have 3 programs that we work on typically. We work through a regional economies program. We do soil and water health focus, and then we have consumer education and advocacy. And so the regional economies program is really on building regional supply chains and connecting growers and manufacturers. So this is working to promote and sustain partners in our supply web. So understanding the farmers, understanding the brands who are trying to make local garments as best they can, and promotion of those people. And also the upcyclers and the menders are all part of this, of course. Manufacturing assessment and development. So this is, for example, how does the Rust Belt Fibershed bring linen manufacturing back to our area? Or where would be the best place for that? Or who can we partner with? Or this could be about wool and about grading wool, right? So all of those things kind of fall into manufacturing assessment and development, and then supply chain support. Oh, sorry, this is the directory. This is the actual support. So what is the support that we're giving people? Our second program, these are individuals from our producers page or directory who are working their butts off to make some really cool stuff as responsibly as possible. Soil and water health. So we're partnered with Plastic Free CLE and different working groups for marine debris, and making sure that we're looking at how do we not only not impact, but how do we reimagine our water use and our impact on the soil as a way to sequester carbon, as a way to, really regenerate our land instead of just even baseline sustain what we have. So that requires fiber systems research. It requires a lot of research, essentially. And then the consumer education and advocacy. So these are our fun projects that we do with our community members to get them talking about where their clothes come from. So we have our 1 Year 1 Outfit project. We have our Rust Belt Linen project. We do talks like this, of course. And then we also have our student ambassador program that we do, which sounds like it's very similar to this remake program. These are some images from our flax project, which very proud to say we are in our 6th year. And this project has now been kind of open sourced and modeled all over the world. So very, very cool to see this project kind of flourish in other areas and get people talking about where their clothes come from, and specifically where linen comes from, and just different discussions on linen. So very proud of this program. And I think this year we have about 51 different garden plots all over the Rust Belt Fibershed, varying from, 4 square feet to an acre. And that's really exciting for us to see, even though we don't have linen production here. People are just planting this, drying it. They may be retting it themselves, and then they are either donating it to weavers guilds or other people who will hand process it because there's no equipment to process flax, or they're just letting it dry in their barns to create a stock for us to use once the processing facilities get here. These are images from the 1 Year 1 Outfit challenge. So this is a really exciting project, and Allison's a part of this project this year. And this is where people are creating outfits from within their fiber shed. And then over the course of a year, and we work with cohorts, and we have a planning, and people can work in groups of 3 and teams to make their outfit. And it's really exciting to see the unique and creative capacity that everyone has, and how that translates into fiber and fiber use and what people are drawn to. at the end of the year, we have a gallery show. This is from our most recent cohort down in Cincinnati. And you'll see like this skirt here was woven from the flax that we grew, and dyed with the indigo from the Praxis Fiber Workshop Cooperative. But every aspect, even the clamshells in this dress here, every aspect of this is from our fiber shed. So it speaks to a different part of what our region has to offer, which is really, really exciting. And this is a buckskin jumper that I just think is so rad. We also have a community page that we're very proud of. And you can hop on this community page, and you don't have to be a member of our fiber shed, although you'll see things in our fiber shed. But if you go to rustbeltfibershed.com, a tab there, maybe says get involved or something, and then it's join the community, and it'll take you right to this page, and you can kind of see what's going on. It is specific to our area with events, but there's also really great workshops that people post that are national, that are like in a whole other fiber shed region. There's articles that people post and that sort of thing too, tips, tricks. So it's not all just local, which is this has worked really well for us. And then, of course, when we think about fiber shed, and you all are familiar with this sort of reflection, is what can you control, right? This is what's in your control to do. So sometimes this seems very, and I should say, and you all know this as ambassadors for Remake, sometimes people can get really burnt out on thinking about what they can control or what they can influence, and people maybe don't want to hear how they can change their habits, or maybe they think like, oh, the problem's too big, how can I do anything about it? But there are things that you can control, and it doesn't require money, right? We can mend what we have, we can wash less regularly, we can swap our clothes, we can look for upcycling opportunities, we can donate quality clothing, we can buy secondhand. If we are buying new clothes, we can buy natural fibers. And of course, we can always continue an ambassador program that supports our spirit and our conversation. We can influence others. That's what you all are doing as ambassadors, and follow your own local policy changes and get involved in your own fiber sheds. And then that's really all that we can do. And knowing that you've done what you can do is so heartening, I think. So that's really it for fiber shed. It's this idea that it's very much like the food shed, right? That we can create our own clothing from our own soil and return it to the soil to feed that soil at the very end and make it beautiful and unique and creative and build community, all while doing that. So that's us. And that's the end of my presentation. If anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much, Jess. If anybody wants to come off mute or type in the chat, please feel free. I know we have a few more minutes left. So even if you just have like a comment or what your favorite part or like a mind-blowing thing that Jess said, feel free to come off mute. And I would like to reiterate too, that this recording will be in the Ambassador Resource Drive after the call. I'll drop it in Slack, and then Jess, I'll email it to you as well. So if you want to watch it again, listen to it, send it to anybody, that would be awesome.
Hi. I have a quick question, Jess.
Yeah.
My name's Mary. I am a professor at FIT, and we
Cool.
do some upcycling work with our fall semester students in sweaters.
Yeah.
And it would be great to figure out a way to collaborate with you somehow.
Absolutely.
Is there like, or even like the student ambassador program, like how do you have more links or information on how I can get in touch with somebody from your network regarding that?
Yeah, for sure. You can just email us at rustbeltfibershed@gmail.com. And then we can continue that conversation. Our ambassador program is still kind of piloting right now. And so we're working through that and kind of considering how to make students more of the leaders so we don't have to continue to lead it.
Of course.
Because of our capacity. But yeah, there's definitely, and they're, the New York Textile Lab, I'm sure you're familiar with them.
I just pulled up their website.
Yeah, she's awesome. Laura Sansoni, I think is her name. she would be a great contact for you. But we always do Zooms and presentations too. So if there's something that you would like for us to present to a group, we do that as well.
Oh yeah, that would be really great.
Cool.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're
Thank
welcome.
you so much for all this.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for showing up.
Mary, I just dropped their email in the chat. I just pulled it from their website. And then I know, Jess, we also had another question. Do you have any suggestions for someone who doesn't have a fiber shed locally?
Yeah, great question. First of all, know that know that it is just a volunteer organization title. And so you can apply to be a fiber shed and organize it yourself for your area, or B, just start talking about this. And that's essentially what, so like I said, if most of the fiber shed affiliates are not 501c3s, it is a personal project that someone is pulling together, and all of us have different capacities. And some fiber shed affiliates, I mean, honestly, don't have the capacity to do much other than like field some emails, right? They're not like building and building and building or doing research and all these different collaborative projects. So you are empowered to do this work, I guess is what I'm saying. You can be the fiber shed even without the official affiliate name attached to you. You can do this work. And then you can also apply to be an official affiliate. And then lastly, I guess, you can connect with someone that's closest to you. If you're, think about someone in your, within 500 miles or within 1,000 miles, or if there's no one in your country though, you could certainly apply to be an affiliate. That'd be very cool. Cool. Yeah, you should do that. That would be great. Yeah, see how they're doing it. Because I think Fibershed International is actually like because the time zones are so funky, they have like other like separate meetings that are more accessible to people too. So yeah, great question.
And Alexandra too, I'm not sure if you've met Deborah yet. She runs Bio Fashion Lab in Florence, Italy. And they do a lot of workshops and stuff around. Good friends, perfect. Yeah, I know talking to her about it too. I'm sure she has some great contacts and would be very interested in trying to work up something like that in the area.
I decided I'll come off of mute. This is something that's been on my mind for a while, especially with regenerative agriculture. And I definitely should chat up Deborah and see like if she has experience with starting, a business. I mean, it's not a business, but bureaucracy is bureaucracy in Italy regardless. But yeah, I'll definitely chat with her. And I think it's something that's definitely needed here. And I think there's a lot more people interested in it too than sometimes I give credit for. So it'd be nice to be able to kind of round them all up.
Yeah, does anyone have any other questions? Otherwise we are, please email us, rustbeltfibershed@gmail.com. And we're so happy to work with anyone outside of our fiber shed. We just really are passionate about this work and want to keep it moving forward. So thank you all for your time.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And huge thank you, Jess. Thank you, thank you. I know I'm pretty new to your guys' fiber shed from the symposium in January, which it did make me cry. It was like the community that you guys have built is so amazing. And yeah, thank you for being here today. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And if you have any questions about, fiber shed, how to get involved, connecting with Jess, or people in the community, feel free to reach out anytime. Yeah, I know that's the work that we love to do, is building this community so we could all make fashion and agriculture and the soil better every year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. See ya. Bye.
Bye.